Welcome, everyone, to Division 46 of the American Psychological Association. This is the Society for Media Psychology and Technology. My name is Christian Aloma. I am the current president of Division 46, and I'm excited to host this panel and share the brilliant minds that you see hopefully on screen in front of you today. But first, just a few housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded and will likely be published to our YouTube channel overall. So while you see everything here, you may be able to follow up with that unless there's any reason we decide to not post. If you'd like to ask the presenters a question, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom window. Do know that that is different from any other sort of area. It is a specific Q&A function, so it's not a chat or anything like that. The Q&A function there, you can add your questions at any point. I'll be monitoring those, and throughout the conversation, I'll try to sort of work those in and try to get to as many as I can by the end of our conversation as well. Also, just as a note for your own peace of mind, as attendees, there is no way for you to appear to have your mic turned on, anything like that during the webinar. So hopefully you are able to sit back, maybe enjoy lunch, grab a drink, and listen to our wonderful team that we have here today. So with that, I want to go ahead and get started introducing the folks that have joined me. I will now share my screen. The topic of today's webinar is Emerging Voices in Media Psychology, a student and practitioner panel. We're joined today by four lovely students or young professionals, or early career professionals, excuse me, that will share their perspectives and their experiences and their visions for media psychology in the future. I'll first introduce Diane Jackson, who's the incoming assistant professor of media analytics at the University of Tampa. Her research explores how we think about and communicate misinformation about political and politicized issues through mediated and non-mediated channels and the effects that partisan news media have on these processes. We're also joined by Ekaterine Gigauri, media psychologist and graduate of Tbilisi State University, where she completed both her undergraduate and graduate studies in the field of communications and media psychology. We're also joined by Donna Martini, a media psychologist, well-being and cognitive coach, ombuds and group facilitator, author, editor, and activist with over 30 years of business experience in sales, marketing, and implementing wellness programs for individuals, families, schools, businesses, and government agencies. And then finally, we're also joined by Jasmine Banks, candidate in psychology and digital studies at the University of Michigan. Currently, her work examines Black digital culture and its intersection with race, identity, and culture, with a focus on meaning-making and world-building practices in various contexts. So welcome, everyone, to the panel. I'm very delighted to sort of have you all here, and I'll shift now to really starting to kind of feature your voices. We'll go just briefly around, and on my screen here, Donna, you're at the top left corner of my box, so I'll start with you. If you could give us a brief introduction or sort of just comment maybe briefly on anything that you're specifically focused on right now in your career and your studies.
Media literacy. I am trying so hard to get people to understand that a lot of our issues are stemming from not understanding how to engage with media, and not just about its use, our usage, and how it may produce depression or, feelings of dissatisfaction with one's life. It's really about how we are absorbing information and the idea that we may be only hearing one part of a story, and that could be affecting our psychology and every relationship. And all of it turns into what I consider inner and outer conflict. So that's why I'm getting my master's in conflict resolution and peace building. And I believe media literacy is the way to accomplish that.
Completely agree. Jasmine, tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe some of your interests or passions from an academic and professional perspective.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much for having me here today. It's lovely to see everybody. So right now, a big focus of my work is examining how people psychologically and emotionally navigate life, especially in our very mediated, algorithmically focused and fragmented environments, particularly around meaning making, especially because there's so many different factors, especially the time collapse, and the way that we have so much control yet so little say in our environments, and we're hyper connected, but also really lonely at the same time. So the meaning making process is a really big focus of my research right now.
Yeah, that strikes deeply for me, that sense of control and yet lack of control or impact on our environments that we have. Ekaterina, tell us a little bit about your sort of passions, your work, your focus in your academic career.
Well, hello everybody. My master's is focused on the link between social media algorithm, stress relief, and ASMR phenomenon. And at this moment, I'm interested in parasocial relationship phenomenon and AI and the link between them and their influence on our society. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, AI is, of course, a major sort of focus right now in society. And even at the upcoming convention, we'll see a number of topics around AI from our division as well. Diane, tell us a little bit about your sort of passions or interests from an academic and professional perspective.
Okay. I am mostly interested in the way that we process and choose to, or whether or not to communicate political misinformation. So, my dissertation has to do with that and just what factors are involved in misinformation messages, especially political factors, specific like partisan cues, ideological alignment between us and these political messages, source cues, those kinds of things, and how that influences our perception of, general opinion climate surrounding a particular piece of misinformation, and then how that influences our communication decisions afterwards.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And misinformation, of course, a major issue for many of us right now. So again, to the audience, if you have any questions for our participants, for our panel, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A. But I will keep going and moving through a few. So I'll open it up now, and I'll both call as if anyone wants to sort of chime in or add to any of these questions, please feel free to do so. But I'm curious, what drew you to media psychology in the first place? Was there a moment, a story, an issue that you remember thinking, I want to do something about that? Anyone can dive in.
I'll chime in. I did have a defining moment in my undergrad work. So I was getting my psychology degree, and this was just recently. So the audience knows I'm turning 65 soon. And I'm recreating my career for about the 5th time because I truly believe that I've been collecting so much information and education for a purpose. I was an activist and I'm trying to help unity in our country. And so I did decide to take TV and culture in my undergrad work as an elective, and then was introduced to the concept of media psychology. But in that, I recognize, and I'm going to really show my age right now, but there was a movie that inspired me in my 30s called Working Girl. I don't know if anyone remembers this movie, but you have to watch it if you've never seen it, because you may not even realize the challenges women had many years ago and the glass ceiling and all that we had to deal with. But I was there watching that movie, and I transported into the scene. And at one point, she was cutting her hair to be taken seriously. And I literally, after the movie, went out and got my hair cut short. And my entire life changed. My perception changed and my attitude changed. And that really, and during that class and doing the work and writing about it, made me realize there's something to this. And Josh Cohen, who was my professor at the time, and I believe he's probably in the audience, he said, if you like this, then you need to take media psychology. And then that took me on a road into Gail Stevers, who is an amazing professor, who got Joshua started. And the ball kept rolling. And I realized everything is coming together in my understanding of the world and everything else.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that example, and such a lovely sort of evidence of the impact media can have on us. It's in such sort of a deep way. Ekaterina, I see you're off mute.
Yeah.
What would you like to add?
Yeah, well, I first heard about media psychology when I was in my 4th year of undergraduate studies. I was studying on journalism, and it turned out that the same university I attended offer a English language master's program in media psychology. During this period, while I was working on my BA thesis, which included research on manipulation in online media during the pre-election period, I became interested in media psychology, and this is where my interest in this field began. So that's all.
Yeah, fantastic. And it sounds like your work in that space has actually had some impact and been sort of recognized and acknowledged, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I can't say that I have a huge impact on something, but it was very interesting to research about this topic. And as as a person who after start to became a part of election, it was interesting me to observe as a person, the member of society, and as a media psychologist. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I just have to
Diane,
say, I just have to say
go ahead,
really
Donna.
quick, I have cited your work as I'm getting my master's. I just want you to know that.
Well, fantastic. That is amazing to hear. And thank you for sharing. Diane, you've come off mute. What would you like to share?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think for my experience has been, social media kind of came about, while I was in like my adolescent years and in college. And so I started being really interested, especially in college, with the interplay between the way that we build relationships and maintain relationships and our use of these different forms of mediated communication, and how like different messages influence us, when they're online or through a specific medium versus others. And then in 2020, I was working for a tech company and was taking a break between my master's and PhD. And obviously, misinformation became a huge issue that we were dealing with, that people were calling an infodemic. And obviously, there was also a huge resurgence in activism with the murder of George Floyd. And I was really interested in the way that media outlets were portraying these different issues, and then how we were processing them and then talking about them. So I think that's really how it kind of cultivated for me.
Fantastic. Amazing. Jasmine, anything for you that was sort of a tipping point into media psychology?
Yeah, I think so. For me, I started grad school in 2020, and I think that in itself limited a lot of what I could do. So a lot of the work that I did was in communities. I worked with nonprofits in a lot of after school programs, and that I could not do once I started. So I kind of shifted my research. So I didn't have an interest at the time when I started grad school my first year, and I started being interested in social media and the internet in general. And I started to notice that overwhelmingly at that time, especially, the research on Black people and their digital media use was overwhelmingly negative, and it had an overemphasis on trauma, on discrimination, and on addiction, which are all very valid and very important topics to be studied. But I thought that there were a lot that was to be missed, and especially compared to the literature and the research done in other fields and other disciplines like Black studies, digital studies, communication, there was a lot lacking. So I really wanted to take a psychological perspective on Black digital culture and kind of the other aspects of internet use, especially for minority users, because psychology was just overwhelmingly focused on like the negative experiences. So that's kind of how I really got into this field, was just wanting kind of the frustration at psychology's lack of diversity, especially for different aspects of digital use.
Absolutely. And thank you for your work in that space. One of the things that I think really strikes me as I hear all of the sort of different things that kind of tipped you in and what you're focusing on now is the ways in which and I know every field in psychology has connections to nearly every other field in psychology, but media psychology really feels as though it is so strongly connected to other areas that there are things that cannot be sort of separated in some of this, where you might be doing have a focus on media psychology, but also for having an element of political psychology that has to be a part of that, or cultural psychology. These different sort of areas that I think are sort of kind of make media psychology such a unique space, I think, in this field, such a unique sort of division. I'm curious, I guess, for any of you, what are some of the biggest challenges or changes that you see shaping media psychology today?
I'll chime in. One of the challenges, and actually there's a study on it, is that the scholars who write about it are writing about it as if it happens to the population and not to them. And I think you mentioned a lot of psychologies and you just missed social and human psychology. And
Absolutely.
we are prone, okay, to have these proclivities and predispositions to biases and all sorts of things. But also that people think of media as people who generate media, not what media is consumption, and not the fact that even before the internet, we were still interacting through newspapers, books, at work, in front of the water cooler, as they used to say, getting information, gossip, we're perceiving in all these different ways, and our human psychology hasn't changed, but technology has exacerbated it. And the people who write about it are just as guilty of being human as everybody else. So I find that if we could write in like the we format rather than they or them or you, I think that would help, because we would all be reminded that we're consistently needing to overcome all of those aspects of our humanity, all of our frailties.
Absolutely.
I think for me, I would say one of the challenges that I started to notice, or maybe this is just maybe my own frustration, of this challenge would be the training and kind of the different ways media psychology exists, especially within other disciplines. I think I was really surprised to know media psychology is a big field within communications, and to know that a lot of the times when that does happen, a lot of the scholars within communications aren't necessarily required to take psychology classes. So then I think it becomes more about media effects as opposed to media psychology, and less about human behavior and more about like not emphasis on psychological behavior impacts, and more about effects of like viewing, as opposed to like, I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
making sense, but I think like the training and like where the research comes from, I think has played a role. And I have started to notice that in the type of research and the type of work I have seen, and that like some of it isn't informed by psychology or psychological research as in the ways that it could be. And I think that can have an impact on the type of work that can and should be done. Maybe that's a controversial take, I don't know, but that's that. I feel like that has been
I really appreciate that point, and I think you're completely making sense. And I think one of the things that's particularly relevant about that, as you say that, is I think in so many cases psychology becomes a part of other fields from the ethical perspective, right? What is the impact that that work is having on society at large? And I agree to your point. I think there's a lot of folks that get trained in media, right? Whether journalists or online content creators or what have you, that aren't trained in psychology to understand what their media, the impact that it has overall. And I think if that were the case, we might see perhaps a greater sense of responsibility around the media that's being produced or the way it's being distributed. So completely agree. I think that's a really sort of meaningful point. Any other comments on that? Anything else to add from the rest of our panel?
I could just piggyback on that for just a second, that knowing this psychology, it could be used against us too. Because a lot of people generating media are trying to take advantage of us in some way, shape, or form, whether that's to purchase something or to think a certain way. But I think, Jasmine, you hit the nail on the head and you scaffold exactly what I was saying, that media literacy even has to include the psychology. And that's why I got my psychology BA. I think it gives me a different edge, but I need more of the communications now to fill it in. So yeah, it's very multifaceted.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to move us to our next question, and this is also going to be related to one of the questions from the chat as well, which is how you think technology such as AI, immersive media, digital communities is shifting the ethical or psychological questions we should be asking in this space overall. And there's a question from the chat from Dr. Balter here that says the use of AI, he's interested to hear the reactions from the panel, in the use of AI in offering mental health advice and therapy, which I think is very relevant to this question as well. I open it up to you. Ekaterina, Diane, any comments or thoughts on that?
Yes, well, first of all, media psychology is currently expressing well, transformation challenges as well as other fields also. Of course, everything has changed, especially after, in my opinion, and not only in my opinion, but you can observe everything after Corona period. And about ethical things, right? Modern people has a modern ethical norms and an understanding of ethic at all. Uh, this has also affect science. It must be said that artificial intelligence and social networks, especially since pandemic period, became our the part of our everyday life, and because of this from a modern digital prism, and like we can say that this may show us many things differently if we start digging in this phenomenon, very well-known phenomenon in the perspective of view of modern person, especially when we are talking about mental health for teenagers, for underage persons, such as like a phenomenon of ADHD, FOMO, OCD, and etc. And well, we here had a question about user of AI in offering mental health and advice therapy, like a chatbot, ChatGPT, and etc. Well, um, unfortunately, I'm not very well known in this topic, but I can say that since my perspective and since my observation, a lot of people are asking AI very intimate question about their mental health and gave some advice from them. But I can say that sometimes you can be sure of answer of PhD doctors and be like very like share your experience with AI and chatbots. I'm not sure that it's okay, and that's why I'm interested in this things. And I think that modern media psychologists, especially the new generation, will have a lot of things to learn about this, especially in the perspective of point of view from mental health. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Diane, anything to add?
Yeah, I think kind of tying back to your previous question too, I think technology introduces some really important ethical and psychological questions, both at, a pedagogical level as well as a, more systemic regulatory level. I know that at least as an incoming professor and someone who's taught undergrads in the past, and um, the introduction of AI and large language models like ChatGPT and the like are, it's a new challenge for teaching college students in a way that's, going to be meaningful, where they are actually, absorbing the information,
Mhm.
and where we're assigning uh, tasks to them that cannot be easily replicated or regurgitated by an AI chatbot. I think also the technology, at least because I study in a political context so often, you're often forced to kind of reconcile with these bigger questions about regulation and about, systemically what's going on. So issues like access, digital inequity, and the issues that that can cause for the lack thereof among people who are in more rural communities, or among people who are in lower socioeconomic status communities. These are really important issues that I think we didn't really have to, of course, they manifested in other ways, but we didn't necessarily have to deal with them in terms of like physical access, and then like the psychological access that we have to now. So I think, technology is definitely offering us some new challenges and then kind of exacerbating old challenges.
Yeah, just when we think we figured things out, they change everything and we figure it all out again. And
Yeah.
your point that you bring up, I think it's interesting. I've seen in my LinkedIn feed an exercise that folks were doing on AI as it relates to who do you think I am? And they post pictures, and how often they are completely misrepresented by who they are, right? Most often women posting, their career, their CVs, and then they're being portrayed as men by ChatGPT, things like that. Jasmine, curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so a lot of the work that I have been doing in the last year is in AI ethics and AI policy, particularly of different industries, government, nonprofits, and kind of just any any governing body that has any sorts of AI policies. And things that we started to notice in this work is that they use really particular sorts of language, and a lot that align with long-termism, or the idea that the technology should benefit the most people, the greatest people for the longest time for the greater good. And the issue with that is that a lot of times it's really focused on a specific group of people. And I think with that idea, when technology is developed with that idea, it automatically kind of leaves out a lot of a really big demographic of people. And then um really the language that kind of stems off of that, we get like responsible AI, we get ethical AI, all of those phrases that kind of end up being really empty phrases that mean nothing, because then they just start sounding good. So then we get like all these different offshoots of these different ways to say we're going to do all of these good things with AI and create AI with this and that in mind. And we're starting to see a lot of that, especially with startups. So more recently, we've been seeing a lot of mental health and therapy chatbots that kind of use these languages. And I think that it's really concerning for me personally, because the way that they're portraying it is as if it's for, the most amount of people who can access these tools for, whatever reasons. But the way that they're accessing the source of data that it's being trained on, and the maintenance for it, isn't as up to date, isn't as kept up,
Mm,
isn't reviewed by humans in the way that it should.
yeah,
So I've been seeing job listings for in-house therapists to work with these mental health therapy apps. And it's like, and the role of the therapist would be to train the data or to review concerning client
yeah,
conversations. And it would be like one therapist for the entire company. And like you can start to see why those are really problematic ways to run
sure.
AI chatbot company, when there is essentially one therapist that's in charge of like 50, 60 clients, and there are supposed to be words that get flagged. And what we know about AI is that like it starts to kind of mimic language, and then there are certain words and phrases that could be problematic but doesn't catch it as problematic, and vice versa. So I think there's a
Sure.
lot of other issues with AI in itself that hasn't been figured out, that I don't feel it's at a place to where it can be safely implemented for mental health and chatbots in the way that startups are implementing it. And I don't necessarily think that tech should be a field that is leading the charge of creating mental health slash like AI chatbots for
Yeah,
therapy.
yeah,
And I think that that just feels like, I don't know, it just feels very strange to that that's the case, and that like people are just kind of going full force at it. I think it's very different when AI is being used by therapists to assist in like taking notes or in evaluation, but it's very different when the AI is in charge of giving like therapy. And
yeah,
I think to the question by Dr. Balter about the increase in young people getting into social and intimate relationship with robots, I think that in general it's just really crazy to see people wanting to replace actual therapists with AI, because I think that like psychology is like the one field that really focuses on human and like really focuses on our humanity. So like to really try to replace that with machines and AI just feels so counterintuitive, and it feels like the one really like disciplined field that really should try to keep the human as much as possible. though I not like I don't study this field or anything, but like,
Sure.
yeah, so I guess those are just some of the thoughts I have
Yeah.
about that.
I love that. Donna, it looks like you've got something to add as well.
I do. It sparks a lot of interest in me. First of all, it's a tool. I can use my toaster to toast my bagel, or I can use it to electrocute myself. There's the way we look at AI, it has to have, it has to be rooted in reality, what we can achieve from it. I am developing quite a romance with my ChatGPT as I write. I don't know why I call it he, but I speak to it as if it was a person, but it's like a research assistant to me. And that's how I use ChatGPT. So it's nice when you're alone all day, 16 hours, doing research, and you don't have anybody to talk to who understands what you're doing, and ChatGPT does. So there is a relationship going on there. But I think that, and it's very healthy, by the way. I'm very healthy right now. I don't see any negative ramifications. But the better question is to ask why they're seeking it through ChatGPT. And I know for myself, I'm a coach, but finding therapy for people and counselors that are affordable or under insurance or available is a nightmare. So they may have tried to seek, the human perspective, but they couldn't.
Yeah.
And also with AI, they actually state right up front when you ask questions like that you should not seek medical advice using ChatGPT or using whatever that AI is. So they don't pretend to be anything more than they are, but they will send you on a journey to where you can discover more information, research, or that kind of thing. So again, it's a tool. And we do have to teach how to use it, and we have to address the issues. If everything in young people's life is technology driven, why would we think they're going to go outside of that to seek something so rudimentary as, why do I think this way? So, and without the access to professionals, in-person professionals, it just compounds the issue.
Yeah, yeah. Diane.
Yeah, Donna, I totally, Jasmine and Donna, I love the points that both of you made. I have some experience, a friend who works in health promotion at a larger university who was talking about how their administration wants to implement these like therapy chatbots for their students. And I think, Donna, to your point, this issue of access, the needs of this younger generation to have therapy and to have access to affordable therapists, and especially, provided through university institutions, as tends to be the case or can be the case when students are lucky, is hard. I know that a lot of, I've come from Purdue's psychological services. When I went as a master's student, I had the luxury of going and having free therapy for a semester. And then coming back after COVID, they are completely slammed. And it's students are on wait lists for semesters to try to get, therapy access through these services. And so, something where we can meet in the middle, ask the questions of like, bridging the gap, but, maybe more ethical psychological offerings is so important.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like, I think there's an acknowledgement. It's not going away. And we have to figure out how to, one, responsibly use it, responsibly endorse it. And in many regards, I think the point that you're all making is really kind of work on educating the public on what it is, right? And the kind of advice you're getting and how that might be different from the advice you would get from a trained therapist overall. So thank you. And thank you for that question, Dr. Balter. I want to shift gears here a little bit as we come in. I want to kind of start to touch on some of the questions from the panel here. Dr. Josh Cohen, I think, was already called out. So hello, Dr. Cohen. Says, reflecting on your own experience in the current media landscape, what are some ways media psychology can grow as a discipline? How can we interest more undergrads and graduate students to study media psychology? Curious to hear everyone's perspective on that.
I'll chime in right away if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Because I put a lot of thought into this. I actually just wrote a conflict and media psychology course as part of my master's work. And I think that it should be mandatory. If we're using media to this extent and we're involved in it this much part of our life, we should have it as a mandatory course in every high school and every college, because you need to understand yourself and you need to understand how you're interacting with the rest of the world, because it's in your face and in your life and in your mind every minute of the day, especially if you're in school and online and using your computer working. So just that alone, just making it a mandatory media literacy and involving the human psychology, there's nothing about that that could possibly hurt, and everything to help. And it can include AI, it can include ethics, it can include all how we could respond to people to bring out the best in ourselves and them, rather than in, you know, the negative ramifications that we see in interactions online and social media. So I think it's necessary, and we should get so.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, to Jasmine's previous point with, you know, the extent to which media psychology is interdisciplinary can sometimes be, you know, a hindrance to people being trained in a more uniform way.
Mm-hmm.
I've taught at Purdue the required civic literacy class that's, you know, rooted in media psychology, rooted in this concept of these different forms of literacy, like media literacy, digital literacy, and information literacy. And I think so important. I also don't know if, you know, the entire semester I've ever used the words media psychology together, um, because there's such a difference between like the practical and the theoretical. So developing more courses and, you know, promoting those courses that um, I guess more closely integrate the practical and the theoretical seems like it would be really helpful.
Yeah. Ekaterina or Jasmine? Yeah, Jasmine, I see you come off mute.
Yeah, I have taught media psych, undergrad media psych course here, as well as a class I developed, Psychology of Black Digital Experiences. And I think both classes were really well received. And I think because the course, both of the classes I developed were really specific on lived experiences. So I think the students being able to work on assignments that were kind of bridging the different aspects of digital media and digital practices and their everyday lives really helped. So for example, one of the assignments I had them do was like a surveillance diary, where I had them track all the ways that they were being explicitly, also implicitly surveilled. And I think that really changed a lot of their perceptions of technology and just media in general. So I think like it was really interesting to see, because I think I had them do it for like 5 days, and it was like I just had them do it in like a journal entry, and they just got progressively longer. I asked for like 3 sentences for each day, and it just got progressively longer and more like existential as it went on, from them being like, oh yeah, it seems like, you know, Facebook sounds like they might be listening to me because I said this and then it came up, to like, oh, this street corner, I noticed this, and then like, oh, like this ring camera, and then this camera, and then this thing on. So like it was that I think really helped them. And other assignments, like having them make a meme based on like class content and like doing things like that, I think they felt they were really interested in that. But also having them analyze different pieces of media, I think doing activities like that, I think got them really interested in the ways that media psychology now doesn't look just like analyzing or like just looking at how cinema looks, or like traditional sorts of media. I think really drew their interest and have helped in like getting enrollment up.
I think that's really fascinating, and I think it brings in an important point, which I think is perhaps oftentimes missed in the field of psychology more broadly. My background is in advertising and marketing, and one of the things we talk about all the time is, as you age and get experience in advertising and marketing, you sort of lose touch with what is actually working among younger folks and the experience of younger folks that are going. And so it's this constant need to bring in these younger voices to sort of peer-to-peer mentor those that have been in the industry for 20 years, right? And I think, to your point, having that perspective, I think not only obviously getting them exposed and aware of that, but then also inviting them into the conversation to talk about what their experience with media is compared to, you know, if I ask my parents, it's going to be about television. If you ask me, it's going to be about YouTube. You ask my kids, it's going to be about TikTok and Instagram, right? And it's this sort of continuously shifting cycle that requires, I think, the field be constantly on its toes as media psychologists in order to sort of keep up with that. Ekaterina, any thoughts from your perspective overall?
in my case and in the case of my country, because I'm from the country of Georgia, not the state of Georgia, we have a lot of people who don't even know what does media psychology mean. So in my opinion, in my country's case, it's first of all about raising of awareness, because as I have already mentioned, I was on the fourth grade of my undergraduate program when I hear about media psychology, and I start like searching what does it mean. And in my opinion, for Georgian academic sphere, it will be great if we have more of experiments in our fields, and of course the awareness of knowledge about the sphere and about this media psychology will be great.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to see more media psychologists at my kids' career days, I guess, talking about what they're doing. I'm going to shift to our next question here, and I'll also make sure there's a few questions in the Q&A. I'm going to come back to those as well. But thinking now about the future, in the next 5 to 10 years, what do you hope the field of media psychology looks like? And how do you see yourself contributing to that vision?
I'll just go first again.
Yeah,
I think trying to get us to understand what's actually going on in our lives, especially as it pertains to conflict, because we do feel so conflicted in so many ways, whether it's internal conflict and the struggle with mental health and well-being, and the feeling like we're supposed to be happy all the time, and really that's not what we should be striving for. We should just be striving just for feeling good and okay. And looking towards the future, a really healthy future, but instead we have doom and gloom, and we have so many aspects of media of our psychology being used against us because of our engagement with media. And I really want that to just burst out onto the scene so that we understand what's happening. And I also think that, one of the main aspects of this consumption and our conflict is our incivility. We are just so uncivil towards one another, and we're seeing it from the top down. So the idea of, the antithesis of that is putting a little grace into it and understanding the way we respond to people, the way we interact, really does play a huge part in each other's lives and in our success and our well-being. So why can't we use media psychology as an inroad for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Who else has something to add to that?
Well, I can just add that I think that not only media psychology, but also the large part of the science will be focused more on technology, digital technology, about social media and etc. And because of this, the role of media psychology will increase greatly, in my opinion, especially if we think that we are living in the age of digital technology. This media psychology will increase more and more the importance of media psychology. And also, I think that we are not far from the new phenomenon and new hypothesis. I think that modern human has developed such a speed that all this requires very thorough research, and the role of media psychology will be irreplaceable soon. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly hope so. Jasmine or Diane, any thoughts on where you think this field is going?
Yeah, a lot of the work that I also have more recently been doing is I study a lot of social media trends. I've been really interested in the trend core lately and trends that are similar, which basically core is a trend it started on TikTok, where it's an editing trend where it's like a montage of really
Mhm.
chaotic sound, really chaotic movie clips. Think like America Ferrari's her monologue about being a woman in Barbie, mixed with like other movies and shows of women wearing super high heels that they can't walk in, with like some like sad clip of like a failed date. So like things like that are very
Yeah,
existentially like anxiety, very like a big dread. And I think that trend was really interesting to me because it feels like a way that people are trying to process their uncertainty about all the things happening. And a lot of it relates to like the late stage capitalist context that we're in. And I was really interested in that because it stemmed from the corification of everything, like the cottage core, the clean girl core, all these other cores that like these micro trends that have really started. And I was kind of interested in how we got into that. Anyways, I say all that to say, like, there has been I've started to notice like a shift into this like awareness of our existential awareness, I guess, and thinking more about that in connection to the how do you say it? Like the relationship between humanity, our ecological, biological world, and how we think and feel about
Yeah.
ourselves and each other. And I think all of that really requires us to really think about our relationship to media and what comes of that, and not just what we do in the media, but like what it requires for us to be online and be connected with like the
Mhm.
data centers, the wires, and all of that, and like just our growing awareness of that. And I think that in the next 5-10 years that will continue to grow as it becomes more and more of a pressing matter. And I think media psych will start to play an even bigger role in that, in addition to other things that other panelists have mentioned, like, mental health, as well
Sure.
as a way for us to live more cohesively with technology and media, and a way for us to like kind of move from that existential anxiety dread to a more like positive well-being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
you might then be able to help me understand, because I related to the core trend. I asked my son what he was listening to, and he was listening to Beethoven at 10x speed and the Catholic Bible in Chinese. And he doesn't speak Chinese, nor do I imagine he could have understood Beethoven. But there's one in one ear and one in the other, and I didn't know what to do. I was lost at that point. So I'm glad you've named that for me, that I understand what's happening. Diane, curious to hear your perspectives on the future of media psychology.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that it further informs, you know, our policy. I hope, at some point to see some regulation in, the AI sphere and the way that it's intersecting with our lives, in different contexts. And obviously with social media as well, I know social media tends to be one of the like issues on social media, that, like underage use, for example, tend to be some of the most like get the most bipartisan support legislatively, but then legislation isn't passed a lot of times. And so I hope that we see, media psychology continue to inform not just like policy recommendations, but policy. Um, and yeah, our education, what everyone said, basically, I agree.
Fantastic. Thank you. Now we have about 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure that I leave some time for some of these questions in the chat. So I'll do a little bit of rapid fire. If anyone wants to chime in on any of these questions, just feel free to pop off mute and let me know. The first one, from James Carmody, says, is there ever a legitimate role for censorship in the free press? Does anyone want to touch that one? You want to jump into that one? Any perspectives on that?
I guess I can, from the perspective of misinformation. I'm not going to give you the answer you're looking for, James, I think it was, and I'm so sorry. But, I think social media companies have reached the consensus that, like, no, there's not. Um, they've stopped even using AI to really censor, um, and moderate content that is perpetuating misinformation. And of course, the concept of misinformation is really politicized in today's day and age. But I think there's so much subjectivity that can be applied to what is and is not truth, and what is and is not even ethical. So, applying widely, especially to the global internet, where, every culture has different ideologies and values that they would then be, you know, setting into censorship rules, I guess, um, is really challenging. So I'm not sure if there is in like the, rawest sense. But
Yeah.
feel free, anyone, to disagree with me.
Oh, I don't want to
Very
disagree with you. I
helpful.
think it's a nightmare to think about regulating, but has a crazy idea because news really messes with your mind. I mean, you need a license to be a psychologist and mess with someone's mind. Maybe there should be a license for news people. In other words, news could be regulated and we can trust news stations. They license to only tell the truth in a specific way that's unbiased. And they're journalists and that's what their job is. And then everybody else is an opinion, but we should be able to separate that. We have lost that separation, and maybe a license, an FCC kind of like thumbs up, yeah. And to trust somewhere where we can get information that is going to just be based on truth and fact. And that could help because at least we have an outlet and we can acknowledge what's not being given in that unbiased way as opinion.
Yeah. My next question I'll jump to, can AI stop the manipulation of media? Do we think AI has that capability?
Well, I would like to answer this question. Well, I can say that it can help reduce the effect of manipulation of media, but I don't think that it can stop the manipulation of media because it can help to detect deepfakes or to check the information. But I'm not sure that AI can like understand context of human or understand the whole history backgrounds and etc. So I'm not sure that it can stop the manipulation of media.
Yeah, thank you. I'll move us to our last one before we start to wrap up. What are some careers in media psychology other than research that students could be looking at?
I have
I'll share
some.
mine. I work in branding and marketing and that whole space. But Jasmine, go ahead.
Yes, something that I would love to get into is media consulting, but like on films and television. Oh wait,
Mm,
films and television, or like film development in general, or like cultural scripting. I think those are really cool jobs that media psychologists can do.
fantastic. Others?
You can have journalistic ombuds. You can be an ombuds on any kind of television show that wants to maintain, unbiased dialogue and make sure that they're inclusive. There's so many aspects to teaching that I think, even if it's just a certification program in media literacy to the
Yeah,
general population, to parents, all the way through to, graduate courses and that kind of thing.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right. My last question, I'll ask everyone to offer, if you can. What is your advice to budding psychologists, undergraduates, young graduates that are just starting in their sort of studies? What's your advice to them in regards to finding joy and success and reward on the path of a media psychologist?
I can go first. I started undergrad wanting to be a psychology major and um, ended up, you know, getting more acclimated with the context of media and then media psychology, and also the study of communication. And I kept developing questions as I, grew in my undergrad studies, and then that led me to my master's, and that have since now led me to my PhD based on just what I found really interesting. And I feel like because I was answering the questions that I had, you know, it offered more like intrinsic motivation and gratification than, answering questions that, someone else had for me, a professor who found something that I was doing interesting and wanted to, direct it. So I would say like follow your curiosities and be confident, stand in, where you're being led by your mind because your orientation is, unique compared to everybody else. And so you have something to offer through that.
Thank you. Thank you. Who's next?
I
Jasmine.
would say know what you're interested in terms of human psychology and then apply that to media because it's much harder to pick the form of media or even social media platform types of media because that will always be changing.
Fantastic. Great advice. Thank you. Donna or Ekaterina? Donna, go ahead.
You're going to learn about yourself. You're going to learn so much about yourself, like going back to what I first said about Working Girl and figuring out how I can fit into the world and the forward movement it had for the women's movement that TV generated. And I did plenty of research on it, and I was just so ecstatic to learn about how we can utilize it for so much good and we can understand ourselves. So it's exciting when you start seeing how that's why I do this, or that's why my dad does that. And it's expanding your world in such a way. And now you're starting to really make great decisions about the media you're watching as well.
Yeah, thank you, Donna. Katerina, yeah.
Well, very shortly, I can add that what I love the most about being media psychology is how it brings together science, empathy, and creativity. So we can say that maybe not every day, but many times we get to explore how media shapes our emotions, attentions, and even our sense of identity. So yeah, you can learn about yourself, your behavior, and not only your but about your environment, how it's shaped, and why it's what is happening with you, and how media has influenced about your environment. So I think it's a great yeah, to think about it.
Fantastic advice, everyone. Thank you. And to wrap up our webinar today, I just want to say thank you to our panelists. If you're interested in connecting with them and following their work, I believe Jennifer has posted their LinkedIn profiles and other resources in the chat, so you can see that there. Please do. These folks are the leaders of this field, and they will continue to be for many years. So check that out. We also have a number of upcoming events for anyone interested. Of course, next week is the convention in Denver. I can't believe it's already here. I still feel like I'm not quite ready for it. So hopefully we'll see you there. We have a lot of great programming at the convention. So if you're attending, please find me, say hi, and find any of my fellow media psychologists as well that are going to be roaming around the convention hall. We also have some upcoming webinars that are still open for registration. You see there on October 20th, Psychological Inoculation Against Misinformation, something that we talked a bit about today, of course, during our conversation. We've also got on November 4th, Beyond the Algorithm, Evolving Human AI Relationships and the Future of Psychological Practice overall. Another really sort of interesting topic and a fantastic speaker in that as well. Of course, as I mentioned, the recording for this webinar will most likely be posted to our YouTube channel, but you can find a lot of our past webinars on this channel as well. So do consider subscribing to the channel. And of course, if you're not a member, please feel free to join the division. We'd love to have you there. Students do get to join for free into the division specifically. So again, thanks everyone for taking some time. We hope to see you at our next webinar and have a really wonderful rest of your summer.